Top 10 times people sold gemstones too soon. They thought it was just glass, garnet, or maybe something pretty, but nothing special. One stone was sold to pay for a sandwich, another traded for a second-hand jacket, and a third lay buried in a drawer for 30 years, dismissed as costume jewelry. And yet each of these stones held something no one saw until it was too late. A $5 ring appraised at $2.8 million. A street-side souvenir revealed as one of the finest opals ever mined. A bargain bin trinket transformed into a flawless diamond under the right light. These weren't just misjudgments. There were moments when fortune was present, but unrecognized. And once gone, there was no calling it back. Because in the world of gemstones, beauty means nothing without understanding. And timing isn't just important, it's everything. This is the countdown of lost chances, forgotten brilliance, and mistakes worth millions. This is Top 10 times people sold gemstones too soon. Remember to press and hold the like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th, Benitoite, the name that came too late. In 1907, near a dry creek bed in San Benito County, California, a prospector named James Couch collected a cluster of deep blue crystals shimmering under the midday sun. They were sharp-edged, transparent, and cool to the touch. Beauty he had seen before. He assumed they were sapphire, cut them, sold them, moved on. Those stones quietly passed from hand to hand for years, underappreciated, mislabeled, sometimes discarded, until one found its way to the desk of a Stanford mineralogist. George D. Louderback examined the sample and realized what Couch had missed. This wasn't sapphire. It wasn't anything that had ever been seen before. This new mineral was a rare barium titanium silicate with exceptional brilliance and dispersion, born in a unique geological environment found nowhere else on Earth. Louderback named it Benitoite, after the hills where Couch had dug it. But by then, the first and finest specimens were long gone. Benitoite's rarity isn't just scientific, it's absolute. The gem forms only under narrow geochemical conditions, and its only known commercial deposit was Couch's original site. Once that deposit was exhausted and the mine shut down, the world was left with a finite number of stones. No second source ever appeared, and that changed everything. Benitoite became California's official state gemstone. Its neon blue fire and fluorescent glow drew collectors and museums from across the globe. Stones over 1 carat now fetch tens of thousands of dollars. Pristine crystal clusters are locked in museum vaults or traded in hushed private sales. The market respects its scarcity. The science reveres its structure. The beauty speaks for itself. But the man who discovered it, the one who held the first actual specimen, never lived to see its name engraved in history books, its image under glass, or its price at auction. He parted with it before the world had words to describe what it was. Not because he was careless, not because he lacked instinct, because time had not yet caught up. Benitoite wasn't lost. It was released too early, like a message before its language existed. And when the world was finally ready to understand it, when it had the tools, the names, the hunger, it was already gone from the hands that mattered most. Ranked 9th, Painite, the ghost mineral that waited 50 years. 1957 British gemologist Arthur C.D. Payne acquired a handful of reddish-brown crystals in Myanmar, then Burma. They came from a gem dealer in the Mogok region, an area already famed for rubies and spinels. Payne examined them under magnification, puzzled by the structure. The stones weren't rubies, garnets, or anything familiar. He shipped one to the British Museum for further study. They gave it a name, Painite. Then, silence. There is no confirmed origin, second specimen, or known source. For decades, the world believed Painite was a one-time anomaly, an accidental fragment of Earth's deeper chemistry. The British Museum held the only known sample, while others sat unrecognized in forgotten drawers, misidentified, or ignored. In gemological literature, Painite became a whisper, a phantom. But one of those misidentified fragments wasn't just filed away, it was sold. It was sold as a tourmaline. It was cheap and forgettable. Its real nature is buried beneath the absence of a name. Years passed, new technologies emerged, Spectrometry replaced guesswork. Microscopes saw deeper, and suddenly the whispers returned. Burmese miners stumbled upon stones that matched the spectral fingerprint of the original Painite. They weren't red tourmaline. They weren't garnet. They were ghosts resurfaced. The tourmaline, once dismissed, now had a verified identity. And with that, a stone once thought to exist in a single specimen began to haunt the gemstone world. Painite was no longer an oddity, it was a revelation. But the early sellers who let those misidentified stones slip away never reaped the reward. They acted on the knowledge available at the time, sold what they believed to be ordinary. But they'd held a mineral rarer than diamond, more elusive than jadeite, and more valuable than either, if recognized. Today, fine-cut Painite fetches staggering figures among collectors. Some estimates place it at over $50,000 per carat, though few specimens even reach 1 carat in gem quality. Museums covet it. Mineralogists consider it a benchmark of ultra-rarity. And yet, for nearly half a century, the market ignored its existence because its name had not yet anchored its value. No theft or deception occurred. It was just a transaction too early, before science could catch up and the world could understand the weight of what was being passed across the table. Painite's actual value emerged not through hype or marketing, but through time. It matured in silence, and when it returned, the ones who had already let go could only watch it rise from afar. Ranked 8th, Alexandrite, the stone that changed in light, but was sold in darkness. Under the flickering bulbs of a rural gem market in Sri Lanka, a dealer slid a blood-red stone across a scratched glass countertop. The buyer, foreign and hurried, held it under the light. Deep wine red. No sparkle. No fire. Garnet, he guessed. The price was modest. A deal was struck. The stone was pocketed, forgotten. It wasn't until weeks later, in a different country and under a different light, that the truth emerged. The stone no longer glowed red. It shimmered green, olive, teal, forest, and in incandescent light, it shifted again, back to its original red, like a secret reversing course. It was not garnet. It was Alexandrite. Alexandrite is one of science's rarest and most mysterious gems, named after a Russian czar. Its signature color change isn't dye or coating. It's the precise result of trace chromium atoms warping light within the stone's crystal lattice. In daylight, it leans green. Under incandescent or candlelight, it turns red. 2 colors, 1 stone. No tricks. But color wasn't the only thing that changed. So did its value. That stone, sold for the price of a garnet, had a market worth dozens, even hundreds of times higher, mainly if it had originated, as suspected, from an older vein. Early Russian Alexandrite from the Ural Mountains is all but exhausted. Clean Sri Lankan stones, when correctly identified, are now auctioned as historical treasures. The original seller never knew. He let it go confidently, pricing it according to what he saw in his lighting. There was no malice, only shadow. If it can be called one, Alexandrite's curse is that its value is contextual. What appears mundane in one setting becomes magnificent in another, and unless the right light finds it, its true identity remains hidden. That's why so many stones like this one have slipped through fingers and sold as garnet, as spinel, as unknown red stone, all because they were seen at the wrong time, in the bad light. Today, investment-grade Alexandrite commands $15,000 to $70,000 per carat, sometimes more if it's from Imperial Russian stock or shows dramatic change. Even lesser stones once dismissed are now hunted by collectors and scientists alike. But for every confirmed Alexandrite, there are dozens still forgotten, in trays mislabeled, sold years ago by sellers who never saw the stone's other face. The tragedy here isn't misjudgment, it's lighting. A gem that changes when the world doesn't look twice. And by the time the right light hits it, the story has already been written, on the wrong receipt, name, for the incorrect price. Ranked 7th, Tanzanite, a fortune, dug from fire, then sold for bread. The land beneath Mount Kilimanjaro does not give easily. It bakes under the equatorial sun and crumbles into dust with the rains. A blue fire once burned beneath the surface in this volatile, volcanic, barely mapped soil. That fire had a name, Tanzanite. In 1967, a Maasai tribesman found glinting blue crystals scattered across northern Tanzania near the Marilani Hills. He brought them to a local trader, who brought them to a gem buyer and a dealer in Arusha. The stones passed from hand to hand like secrets in motion, each seller believing they had nothing more than colored zoisite. And so they were sold, quickly, cheaply. Many were exchanged for sacks of flour, bags of rice, or enough money to feed a family for a week. The miners who pulled them from the earth weren't gemologists. They worked barefoot, with hammers and hope. No one told them the stone they carried was new to the world. No one said the color, blue with flashes of violet, was so rare that it only occurred in one known deposit on Earth. The first Tanzanite boom had already drained some of the wealthiest veins when the outside world noticed. Tiffany and Company gave it a name. Magazines called it the gem of a generation. Celebrities wore it on red carpets. The prices soared. But the men who found it first, the ones who dug in dust, who traded it for bread, were already gone from the story. Unlike diamond, emerald, or ruby, Tanzanite has no second source, no rival mine, no fallback country. The entire global supply comes from a single stretch of land no longer than a village road. And that's where the weight of this story lies. In the following years, Tanzanite would become one of the most sought-after colored gemstones of the 21st century. Prices for top-tier stones now reach $1,500 to $3,000 per carat, with larger or untreated stones commanding even more. A few of the early flawless specimens, sold in plastic bags uncut for pennies, now rest in museums and private vaults, each worth a small fortune. And yet for those who sold too early, the value wasn't hidden. It hadn't been translated. What looked like a shimmer in the dust turned out to be wealth condensed by heat, pressure, and time, so dense it could change a life. Some stones hide their worth in shadows. Tanzanite never did. Its mistake was being found by people who trusted hunger more than market forces, people who knew what it meant to survive, not to wait. They didn't misjudge the gem. They didn't have time to keep it. Ranked 6th, Red Beryl. The flame that paid the rent but could have bought the house. Utah isn't famous for treasure. It's renowned for silence. Red cliffs, dry wind, dust that settles for centuries. But in one remote corner of the Wawa Mountains, something burned beneath the rock, not with fire but with color. Red Beryl, smaller than emerald, rarer than a diamond, and in many cases more fragile than either. It doesn't come in waves or veins or seams. It forms in pockets, microscopic windows of heat and pressure, locked in volcanic rhyolite. Fewer than one crystal in 150,000 Beryl specimens is red, and nearly all are too small, fractured, or cloudy to be worth cutting. But sometimes one makes it through, and when it does, it looks like a drop of hardened sunset. Deep crimson, clear, and so vibrant it almost glows. Stones like that can fetch $10,000 to $50,000 per carat, sometimes more. But those numbers came too late for many who touched them first. One such story follows a woman in western Utah. She wasn't a miner, just the daughter of one. Her father had found a few red crystals during his time at the Ruby Violet claim. Nothing significant, nothing showy, but one stone, polished and mounted in a silver ring, caught light differently. He passed it to her without fuss. She wore it for years. Then she sold it during a brutal winter when rent was late and groceries couldn't wait. It went for $200. Years later, that same stone resurfaced at an appraisal event in Salt Lake City. A gemologist lifted it under his lens, paused, and exhaled. Natural, untreated, transparent. One of the cleanest red beryls he'd seen in years. Estimated value, over $80,000. It wasn't a mistake of ignorance. She knew it was rare. It's just not how rare. And the world around her hadn't yet told her it was worth more. That's the story of Red Beryl, scarcity hidden in scale. Most crystals are under a carat. Many can't even be faceted. The best ones often go unrecognized because they don't look like what the world expects a valuable gem to be. They're small, unassuming. But when they're real, they're almost priceless. Today, Red Beryl is mined under strict security. Collectors hoard it, investors track it. And those who own one rarely part with it, because when the mines run dry, and they're already close, there won't be any more. It wasn't greed that made her sell. It was circumstance. The stone paid what it could at the time, not for dreams, but for days. And somewhere out there, that ring sits in a velvet box, not worn, not remembered. I'm just waiting, more valuable now than everything it was once traded for. Ranked fifth, blue garnet, the stone that changed its mind and left millions behind. Some stones shimmer, others reflect. Blue garnet refracts memory. Discovered in the late 1990s in Madagascar, it wasn't even called blue at first. In the field, it looked greenish-gray, muddled, like seawater under a cloud. It was not impressive and certainly not valuable. Traders passed it off as a curiosity, bundled it with other mixed-color garnets, and sold it in bulk. A Tokyo gem dealer purchased one of those stones for less than $100. Back home, under incandescent showroom light, the stone morphed. Not subtly, not partially. It bloomed. What had been muted teal turned fiery raspberry red. A complete color shift, vivid and bold as if the gem had changed its mind. The dealer blinked, rechecked, and then ran tests. This wasn't normal garnet. No one expected this. A color-change pyrope spessartine garnet with trace vanadium. And unlike the shift of Alexandrite, which leans from green to reddish-purple, blue garnet transitioned from a subdued blue-green to a saturated scarlet. No other garnet had ever behaved like this. The news spread fast. The few stones already sold, many under market rate, mislabeled or dismissed, were suddenly worth more than gold. Once purchased for pennies, the Tokyo dealer's specimen was reappraised at over $1.5 million in 2003. But by then, the source was gone. The mine in Madagascar had dried. Other deposits yielded fragments, but none with the same shift. Sri Lanka and the U.S. produced blue garnets too, but rare, faint, and far from the fire of that first find. For those who'd sold early, who let go before science and sunlight caught up, there were no do-overs. The stones had changed. Their value had changed, but time could not. Garnets have always been the underestimated sibling in the gem family. Too common, too cheap, too red. But this one rewrote the rules, not by being louder, but by being quieter until the exact moment light revealed what lived beneath. Today, blue garnet is almost mythical. Most collectors have never seen one. Labs hold samples under tight control. High net worth clients commission pieces that rarely leave private vaults, and still only a few ever surface. Those who own one seldom speak about it. Those who don't often don't believe it's real. Blue garnet didn't hide, it just waited. And while some ran their fingers across its surface without knowing what they held, it quietly rehearsed its transformation. Until one day it turned red, and the opportunity was already gone. Ranked fourth, Serendibite, the shadow that wore no name. In the mines of Sri Lanka, not everything glittered. Some stones resisted light, dense, dark, and opaque. They absorbed torch beams and dulled reflection. When unearthed, they were labeled waste. They were too hard to cut, black to sell, and strange to study. Among them was Serendibite. No one called it that in the beginning. The miners gave it no name. Gem dealers tossed the pieces into discard piles or sold them by weight to scrap collectors, thinking they were spinel or just something close enough. A matte, deep bluish-green piece was bought for a few rupees and thrown into a bulk parcel. It crossed borders, was ignored, then cut badly. Years passed by when someone finally held it to the light properly, and then something impossible happened. Under direct, focused light, the stone didn't shine. It absorbed, like a void wrapped in mineral skin. The sample was sent to a lab in Bangkok, where the spectroscopic analysis identified a composition previously undocumented in gem form. A complex calcium-aluminum silicate with trace boron and magnesium. The refractive index is off the charts, and the density is far beyond sapphire. The rarity is beyond reckoning. It was Serendibite, named after Serendib, the old Arabic name for Sri Lanka, a name it earned too late. By the time gemological journals caught up, only a handful of faceted stones were known to exist. Most were under 1 carat. Cuttable material was nearly non-existent. The original veins, long ignored, had been blasted or buried. The black fragments, once sold as worthless, were suddenly reclassified as priceless. One faceted Serendibite, under 1 carat in weight, sold for over $2 million in a private exchange. There were no auctions, no press, whispers, but the miner who pulled it from the ground? He never knew. The buyer who grabbed it in a mixed lot? Sold it for almost nothing. This wasn't a mistake of identification, but the absence of recognition. The kind of loss that doesn't feel like loss, until the rest of the world catches up. Today, Serendibite remains among the rarest gemstones ever classified. Most gem dealers will never hold one. Museums keep them under guard. Even images are rare, because light struggles to pass through them. They are, in a sense, shadows with weight, and shadows don't announce themselves. There are stones you miss because they hide, and there are stones you miss because you weren't looking. Serendibite was never sold for too little. It was sold with no value at all, and the silence it left behind still weighs more than its carat ever could. Ranked third, black opal, the fire mistaken for glass. It sat in a pawn shop window, small, opaque, dull under the fluorescence. A curious little stone is in a scratched silver ring. The tag reads, "Glass, $400. It had been brought in by a man looking for fast cash. Rent was due and the engine was broken. He had picked it up years ago on a rural New South Wales trip. I found it at a roadside stand, buried among agates and shells." "Nice color," the seller had said. "It's an Australian souvenir." No papers, no origin, just fire. But the pawn shop clerk didn't see the fire. Not under those lights, not through that glass. Until one day a gem appraiser walked past. He didn't stop for the sign or the price. He stopped for something else, movement, a flicker inside the stone. Not a reflection, not a rainbow, a pulse. He asked to see the ring. Under daylight, the stone came alive. Flashes of electric green, red flame, and ultraviolet blue rolled under the surface like lightning in oil. The body was black, but the fire within had depth. It didn't sit on the surface. It surged from within. It was no glass. It was lightning-ridged black opal, the rarest kind, untreated, solid, possibly over 3 carats. Tests confirmed its origin, a stone formed in Cretaceous clay seams over 100 million years old, where ancient sea creatures once decayed and left space for color to grow. The pattern? Harlequin fire is one of the most prized in the opal classification. The $400 ring was reappraised at $150,000. The man who sold it? Gone. Paid. Receipt signed. No refunds. Australia's Lightning Ridge region produces the finest black opals in the world. Stones that, at their best, seem to carry entire storms inside them. Unlike white opals, black opals display their color with greater contrast. The darker the body tone, the brighter the flame. But they can look lifeless under fluorescent lights, the kind pawn shops use. That's the trick. Black opal doesn't show off unless you ask it to. It doesn't sparkle like a diamond or glow like a ruby. It moves subtly if you're watching. If not, it waits. And many have missed it. This wasn't a mistake of greed, science, or chance. It was a mistake of light. The fire was there. But only those who stepped outside turned the stone slowly and didn't blink. Only they ever saw it. And by the time it caught flame in the right hands, the seller had already gone cold. Ranked second, Kashmir Sapphire, the blue that was lost in a box. In the high valleys of Kashmir, there was once a place called Zanskar, windless in winter, silent in summer. And for a few years in the late 1800s, it yielded something the world still hasn't matched. A blue that didn't just shine, it floated. Software misty, velvet, the kind of blue that looked like it was breathing. They called it Kashmir Sapphire. The original deposit was discovered in 1881, exposed by a landslide, and exploited almost immediately. For a brief window, British colonial officers and local workers mined the slope, pulling out velvet blue crystals, unlike anything seen before or since. But by the early 20th century, the mine had collapsed. buried under rock, snow, and political silence. No new source was ever found. For decades, Kashmir sapphires became the obsession of kings, collectors, and gem connoisseurs. The hallmark, a soft cornflower tone, laced with silk, microscopic rutile inclusions that scatter light just enough to give the gem its ethereal glow. The best stones are unmatched in the sapphire world. Burmese sapphires are richer. Sri Lankan sapphires are cleaner. But Kashmir is atmosphere in mineral form. And that brings us to a small box at a garage sale in Montana. A woman cleaning out her aunt's estate placed the box on a plastic table. Inside were costume brooches, beaded necklaces, and a ring with a blue stone, set in tarnished gold, unmarked, ignored. A man bought the whole box for $5. He wasn't looking for treasure. He was a collector of vintage packaging. The ring meant nothing, until his wife wore it to dinner under candlelight. The glow wasn't sparkle, it was soft like dusk. An appraisal followed, then a verification, then silence. The sapphire turned out to be a natural cashmere. It was unheated, roughly 5 carats, perfectly cut, and likely mined before 1915. Its appraised value was $2.8 million. There were no records of how the ring had entered the family. No one alive remembered seeing it, and there was no story to tell, just a name that had long since faded from its stored box. But its seller? She received $5, because no one, not even she, knew what had been sleeping in that box for nearly a century. Kashmir sapphires don't shout. They wait, and when the world forgets how to see them, they disappear again, into drawers, storage, and silence. There are mistakes made in haste, and there are mistakes made by absence. This was neither. This was a blue so rare it was mistaken for nothing at all. In first place, the diamond in a plastic bag. She wasn't a collector. She wasn't a jeweler. She was just curious. The ring sat in a Tupperware box buried beneath beaded bangles and plastic brooches, a folding table, a lawn sale, a woman thinning out her attic. The tag read, "Costume jewelry, $15." The stone looked wrong, too large to be real. There was no sparkle, no fire, just a heavy cushion-cut center set in aged silver. She picked it up, smiled at the absurdity, and paid in cash. It became a party joke, a conversation starter. It's the kind of ring people try on for fun. She never questioned it. For nearly 30 years, it sat in her drawer, forgotten. One afternoon on her way to lunch, she stopped at a jeweler to have her usual necklace clasp repaired. As she waited, she pulled out the ring and said, "Mind cleaning this old thing too?" He held it under the loupe, then under light. Then they silently walked to the back room. The test took 10 minutes. The silence was longer. What she had purchased in a plastic bin for $15 was a natural 26.27 carat diamond, cushion cut, D color, internally flawless. With that grade, a stone of this size doesn't surface casually. It doesn't slip into flea markets. It doesn't belong in drawers. And yet, there it was. No paperwork, no certificate, no provenance. Just a mistake. Experts speculated it may have been separated from an estate during liquidation or passed down without context, its value buried by time and poor lighting. Some diamonds fade in story before they fade in shine. Sotheby's listed it as the tenor diamond. It sold at auction for $870,000. A bidding war, cameras, spotlights, headlines, and somewhere in the echo of all that applause was the memory of a stranger who had sold it, thinking it was glass. That person was never identified, no record of the original owner. No seller's name, no trace. Only the moment when they let it go, for nothing. Mistakes in the gem world come in many forms. A wrong label, a missed inclusion, a color under the wrong light. But this was different. This was absolute. The greatest misjudgment is not just in price, but in presence. Because when a diamond is real, it does not need to be announced. It waits, and the world eventually finds it. The question is whether you're still holding it when it does. They didn't sell junk. They didn't make foolish choices. They let go of brilliance before the world had eyes to see it. Some stones are loud, others wait in silence. And when the time isn't right, Even the rarest gem can look ordinary. From sapphire mistaken for glass, to diamonds left in plastic bags, to fire opals passed off as souvenirs. These weren't just stones sold too soon. They were futures traded for fragments of the present. But maybe that's the quiet power of gems. They don't ask to be known. They exist, waiting for the right moment to be seen. And if this countdown taught us anything, value doesn't always arrive when it should. But when it does, it never waits twice. Let us know which resonates with you in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.